What if I told you that a woman's final act of kindness, giving $10 to help feed a baby, led to her brutal murder? What if I told you that this heartbreaking story made national headlines, changed laws, and influenced how millions of people view the homeless? And what if I told you that every single word of it was a lie? This is the story of Jacqueline Smith, a case so twisted that it fooled an entire nation and exploited our deepest fears about urban crime. By the end of this video, you'll understand why nothing, and I mean nothing in this case, was what it seemed.
Jackie was an awesome, awesome woman, and it's really, really sad, and it's heartbreaking the way that she was taken from us.
You know, it makes me look at everything and everyone. Nothing is ever what it seems, and you just have to protect your family out here.
If you're fascinated by true crime cases that challenge everything you think you know about human nature, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. November 30th, 2018, Baltimore, Maryland. What should have been a joyful evening celebrating a belated 28th birthday at the American Legion Hall was about to become the setup for one of the most shocking murder cases in recent memory. Keith Smith, 52, sat with his wife Jacqueline, 54, and his daughter Valeria as they laughed, danced, and took photos together. Jacqueline, a successful electrical engineer for the Department of Defense, was known for her generous heart and deep faith. She'd raised 2 sons who served in the Coast Guard and had found happiness in her 4-year marriage to Keith. As the clock approached midnight, the family prepared to leave. But Keith would soon make what he claimed was a tragic decision that would cost his wife her life. Just blocks from Valeria's home, Keith spotted a young woman on the street holding a baby, carrying a sign begging for help to feed her child. At 12:30 a.m. on December 1st, Keith Smith's panicked voice pierced through Baltimore's emergency dispatch system. His wife was dying. She'd been stabbed multiple times by a panhandler she'd tried to help. Blood was everywhere. According to Keith's frantic account, Jacqueline had rolled down her window to give $10 to the desperate mother when suddenly a man appeared. "Can I thank your wife?" the stranger allegedly asked. In the next split second, this unknown assailant was stabbing Jacqueline repeatedly before snatching her necklace and purse and disappearing into the night. 5 brutal stab wounds to her torso, 1 deep cut to her right arm. Despite heroic efforts at Johns Hopkins Hospital, Jacqueline Smith was pronounced dead before 1 a.m., becoming what appeared to be the victim of a senseless act of violence that would send shockwaves across America. The story had everything that terrifies us about urban crime: a generous woman, a dark street, and predators disguised as those in need. Within hours of Jacqueline's death, Keith and Valeria Smith stepped before news cameras to deliver a chilling warning to their community. Don't trust appearances. Be careful who you help. The homeless aren't always what they seem. Keith's voice trembled as he recounted the horrific attack. Valeria, tearful and shaken, described watching her stepmother die right before her eyes. She spoke of never wanting to look at the world the same way again, of how nothing is ever what it seems. Their performances were so convincing that Baltimore residents began crossing streets to avoid panhandlers. New laws were proposed to crack down on street begging. The story exploded into national headlines, with Oprah herself tweeting that she'd done the same generous act thousands of times, but would now think twice. But here's what nobody knew yet. Keith and Valeria Smith were delivering Academy Award-worthy performances. Every word was a carefully crafted lie designed to cover up the most cold-blooded betrayal imaginable. Experienced Baltimore detectives Borgard, Singer, and Santos arrived at the alleged crime scene on Valley Street, expecting to find the typical aftermath of a violent robbery. Instead, they found absolutely nothing. No blood, no witnesses, no evidence that any crime had occurred at that location. Their canvass of the neighborhood revealed something crucial. The 1,000 block of Valley Street was essentially deserted. Most houses were vacant. This wasn't an area where panhandlers operated because there simply weren't enough people to panhandle from. When Keith's 2012 Audi A7 was processed for evidence, investigators found Keith's fingerprints, some gloves, and even Valeria's broken acrylic nail in the back seat. But what they didn't find was far more telling: Not a single unidentified fingerprint or DNA sample that could be linked to unknown attackers. The FBI's extraction of GPS data from the car's computer system failed, but cell phone records told a completely different story. While Keith's phone showed no activity that night, Valeria's phone revealed a shocking truth. The cell phone data exposed the first major crack in Keith and Valeria's story. After leaving the American Legion Hall at 11:45 p.m., they hadn't traveled south toward Valeria's home as they claimed. Instead, they'd gone north to Druid Hill Park near the Maryland Zoo, where they remained for approximately 15 minutes. Even more suspicious, Jacqueline's phone showed no activity after 4 p.m. that afternoon, despite Keith claiming she had it with her. The phone never left their Aberdeen home, contradicting the story that it was stolen during the attack. 27 CCTV cameras lined the route Keith claimed to have taken. Not a single one captured his vehicle. Motion-activated residential security cameras that should have recorded the incident showed nothing. When Jacqueline's credit card was finally used days later, it was found by teenagers at a bus stop on Caroline Street and Madison Avenue, not near the alleged crime scene, but on the exact route Keith and Valeria had actually traveled according to their cell phone data. The investigation was revealing a pattern of lies, but Keith's behavior was about to become even more suspicious. Just 2 days after his wife's brutal murder, Keith Smith appeared at Jacqueline's workplace with a very specific request. He wanted the paperwork to claim her life insurance benefits. As the sole beneficiary of her $804,000 policy, Keith stood to gain substantially from Jacqueline's death. When investigators, already suspicious of his story, instructed the insurance company to hold payment, Keith found himself in a financial bind. Credit card applications were declined. He was forced to apply for cash advances just to fund what would become an elaborate escape plan. Meanwhile, through Keith's brother Vic, investigators learned something crucial. Jacqueline had been talking about divorce in the months before her death. The couple's lavish lifestyle, expensive cars, even a yacht, was primarily financed by Jacqueline's income. A divorce would have left Keith facing financial ruin. But Keith had a more permanent solution in mind, and it involved manipulating his own daughter into becoming an accomplice to murder. The investigation was closing in, and Keith knew it. Time to run. On February 4, 2019, Keith Smith's neighbors witnessed something telling. A large moving truck appeared overnight, and by the next day, Keith had packed up everything and vanished to Florida on a hastily arranged year-long lease. But law enforcement was watching. Wiretap warrants were in place, tracking Keith's every desperate move as he tried to evade justice. Keith attempted to be clever, changing phone numbers and providers, even shipping a new cell phone to his daughter. But the FBI was still listening to every conversation, watching every transaction. His escape attempts grew increasingly frantic. Keith tried booking flights to Canada and Cuba, but lacked the passport needed for international travel. He researched flying to the US Virgin Islands with just a driver's license. His internet searches revealed queries about traveling to Mexico without going through official border crossings. On March 1st, Keith rented a car in Texas. This triggered immediate action from Baltimore police, who issued arrest warrants for both Keith and Valeria for first-degree murder. The timing of Keith and Valeria's arrest was crucial. They were captured just 20 minutes from the Mexican border, clearly attempting to flee prosecution for murder. Their arrest marked the beginning of the end for one of the most elaborate deception schemes in recent criminal history. But the truth that emerged would prove even more shocking than anyone had imagined. Under pressure from investigators and facing overwhelming evidence, Valeria Smith finally broke. She admitted that the panhandler's story was a complete fabrication. She confessed to witnessing her father murder Jacqueline in Druid Hill Park, exactly where cell phone data had placed them that night. Valeria revealed the horrific truth. After their birthday celebration, Keith had driven the family to the park under false pretenses. Jacqueline, exhausted from the evening's festivities, had dozed off in the passenger seat. That's when Keith struck, stabbing his sleeping wife 5 times in a cold-blooded act of betrayal. The murder weapon was disposed of in the woods. Jacqueline's belongings were scattered at various locations to support the robbery narrative. And Valeria, manipulated by her father and struggling with addiction and mental health issues, had been coerced into participating in the elaborate cover-up. Valeria Smith's transformation from accomplice to key witness represented one of the most dramatic turns in the case. Facing her own murder charges, she accepted a plea deal to testify against the father who had manipulated her into covering up his heinous crime. In court, Valeria provided devastating testimony about the night her stepmother died. She described how Keith had remained eerily calm immediately after the murder, but suddenly became frantic and emotional when calling 911, essentially switching on a performance for the emergency operators. She testified about helping dispose of evidence, including Jacqueline's Michael Kors clutch, which she left at the bus stop where teenagers later found it. She revealed how Keith had coached her on the panhandler story, exploiting her addiction and psychological vulnerabilities to ensure her cooperation. The medical examiner's report supported Valeria's testimony, revealing that Jacqueline's left hand contained Keith's DNA, evidence suggesting she had fought desperately against her husband as he attacked her. Keith Smith's defense team tried to paint Valeria as the real killer, but the evidence overwhelmingly supported her account of the murder. In December 2021, after a week-long trial that captivated the nation, Keith Smith was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge's words at sentencing reflected the extraordinary cruelty of Keith's crime. He had not only murdered his wife in cold blood, but had manipulated an entire nation's fears about urban crime and homelessness to cover his tracks. Valeria Smith received a 5-year sentence for her role as an accessory after the fact. While she had participated in the cover-up, the court recognized that she had been manipulated by her father and was herself struggling with serious addiction and mental health issues. For Jacqueline's family, the verdict brought a measure of justice, though it could never restore the remarkable woman they had lost. Her sister Yvonne expressed gratitude that the truth had finally emerged, noting that Jacqueline's intelligence, wit, and generous spirit would never be forgotten. The case serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes the most dangerous predators aren't strangers lurking in dark alleys. They're the people we trust most, sitting right beside us.